Welcome back to this special conversation on how much should we make the rupee global, and if yes, what steps should we take to make it global? That's the conversation we are having with Professor Arvind Panagaria, the Professor of Economics at Columbia University, Mr. G. Padmanabhan, former Executive Director at RBI, and Hemant Mishra, the co-founder and CEO of Scoop Capital. Gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Mr. Padmanabhan, I think we were agreed before we went into the break that our first concentration will be on other things like, growth and macros, and internationalization will happen in its own time. What would you recommend as immediate steps that India can take?
Look, if you are talking about internationalization, obviously, there are 2-3 advantages of whatever steps the Reserve Bank has done, and it has done in a very coordinated manner, which we need to appreciate. One thing which could be the outcome if this takes off is that there could be reduction in transaction cost. There could be better transparency as far as, and this has to be seen in the link with the CBDC, the kind of efforts are happening. Because to me, my mind, as far as at least this country is concerned, the CBDC is going to have the maximum impact as far as the cross-border transactions are concerned in terms of, bringing down the cost of transaction, the speed of transactions, etc. Yes. So the transaction cost is one thing that is going to definitely reduce. The second thing, on account of this invoicing and the central banks having the swap lines, what we need to understand is something similar to, although it was not a great success, the ACU, we are actually netting dollars. The use of dollars is reducing. So definitely that's a step forward as far as reducing the use of dollars is concerned. Maybe it is not complete internationalization, but we are making sure that the use of dollar is constantly reduced.
Mr. Padmanabhan, 1 minute. Mr. Padmanabhan, 1 minute. I think I'm confusing you all by constantly saying internationalizing. Maybe I should just say that how much more can we use the rupee for cross-border transactions? What steps can we take?
No, already the steps that we are taking 2 important steps. One is for the trade, the other is for the P2P payments.
Okay.
And these are the important steps that need to be taken, can be taken under the current stage of convertibility, unless we talk about the capital account being liberalized further, and then talk about more internationalization for transactions. So the first 2 steps are the right steps taken, given the kind of convertibility stage we are in as of now.
Okay. Hemant, there are people who obviously look at India as having too many problems, even opening a non-resident account for non-resident transactions. So do you think some of those steps need to be taken? Just nuts and bolts.
So quite a few things need to be done. I mean, at the cost of sounding non-popular, India continues to be a complex place to do business. But that's kind of beyond the agenda of this particular discussion. The 3 things that are needed for one to even start thinking about internationalizing or globalizing the currency is obviously a strong macro conditions for the country. You don't want to go ahead and open yourself to whatever little risk, because it's a double-edged sword in some ways. And the report does talk about it. So you want to do it when you are at your strongest, and you want to do it from a position of strength, which obviously works well for India. The second is obviously it needs to translate into tangible benefits, whether it's transaction cost or incremental flows, whether on the trade or on the capital account. And that will only happen if people lay trust in the regulatory framework in terms of enforceability of contract and whatnot. Yes, now that again works very well for India. And I'm drawing a distinction between India and, for that matter, China, which I look at and track pretty closely. And the third is, a deep and vibrant domestic financial markets, because, some of the residual flows will eventually get invested back into the domestic markets. So these 3 preconditions are already there. Okay. Now, what are the few things that need to be done? And I would break them in 3 buckets, right? The short term, the medium term, and the long term. I think the short term, we've got to do more of the same. Some of the bilateral arrangements that we've got with some of the countries. We spoke about Malaysia. There's one with the UAE. Extending the UPI network. It was a delight for me when Singapore became a signatory to it. So some of this should be done, and this is very important for us because we've got a very skewed payment profile on the trade side. I mean, we obviously run a trade deficit, but we've got oil import bill that comes from the Middle East, while our exports come in predominantly from the US and Europe, and predominantly services. So we'll have to get that mix right. Otherwise, we'll have a situation like we had with
Hemant,
India-Russia problem.
Hemant, unfortunately, I get your point, Hemant. I'm unfortunately out of time. I have to get last one minute of thoughts from Dr. Panagaria. Do you think, sir, we have to persist with this, at least the noise of rupee as a global invoicing currency, simply because of the geopolitics?
I see no harm in that, Lata. I think we should certainly do that. But ultimately, to get there, the only developing country that I see which is closest to being internationally there is China.
Yes.
And that is where I see, we really need to open up in a much bigger way. Our heft in international trade has to rise significantly compared to where we are today. And keep doing that, do sign the free trade agreements and with various countries, become the one in the China plus one equation. Yes. And I think the rest will follow. Okay. So that is my sort of recommendation, which is good for the economy, which is also good for the rupee to become an internationalized asset.
Okay, so that is extremely well put. Thank you very much, Dr. Panagaria, Mr. Padmanabhan and Hemant for joining in this conversation. So let's do the big thing by becoming more and more involved in global trade, by biting off a larger chunk of global trade, by signing FTAs and maybe even this currency swap agreements. The global role of the rupee will come in its own time. On that note, we wrap up on this edition of Indianomics. Thank you for watching.